This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on AFR Talk.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. I want to close the loop on what I started to talk about at the end of the last segment about whether somebody who brings a lot of money back to his home state actually helps that state or not. And this piece on the Washington Examiner indicates that a senator like Senator Cochran, who is known for being an appropriator, that means he brings a lot of money, a lot of federal money, a lot of pork back to his own state, that he may be helping K Street. K Street is the street in Washington, D.C., where most of the lobbyists have their offices. He may be helping K Street, but he may not be helping Mississippi. Here's an excerpt from the piece. Having your senator become appropriations chairman appears to, quote, significantly dampen corporate sector investment and employment activity. This is according to a 2010 study by 3 Harvard Business School professors. The study, published in 2010 by the National Bureau of Economic Research, explored whether federal aid helped or hurt a district or a state. Now realize, people, their assumption is this helps. The assumption is more money in our state is good. More money from the federal, well, it's just from taxpayers. We send the money to D.C., they turn around and pay people to handle it and then send a portion back to us. We just assume, everybody just assumes that's good. That's a benefit for the state. That's good for the state. And this study saying not so fast. One difficulty in exploring this question, poorer areas might tend to attract more federal dollars, thus skewing the data. Since a state gets much more in federal funding when its lawmaker gets a committee chairmanship, and Senator Cochran was chairman of the Appropriations Committee, he will be again if he's reelected in November and the Republicans take control of the Senate. He will be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Here's the question. How does that state's economy perform during these gavel-induced floods of federal cash? So let's say you've got an appropriator. He can send millions and billions of dollars back to his home state. And so you can kind of track what happens to the economy of that state while that guy is wielding that kind of influence. Compare it before, compare it after. How does the economy of the state, and remember, it is the economy that provides growth, it provides an actual increase in wealth, it provides jobs, it provides an increase in wages. In other words, if you don't have growth in the economy, you really have nothing, because if the federal government's just printing money in the basement, that's just monopoly money. It's not backed by any genuine wealth. So what you want is you want a state economy, a private economy, that's growing. It's creating wealth because it's producing goods and services that people actually want. They're not forced to buy it. They purchase them because they want them. It meets a need for them, and that causes your economy to grow. Business finds goods or services that people want, then they grow. There's more demand for their stuff. They hire more people. They pay higher prices. They expand their operation. They pay top dollar to attract good talent. That's how you get an economy to grow. So how does the state's economy perform when they're awash in federal dollars? Not well, it turns out. The federal money crowds out private investment. And in the year, quote, in the year that follows a congressman's ascendancy, the average firm in his state cuts back capital expenditures by roughly 15%. So in other words, the larger the government, the smaller the economy. That's the best way to look at it. Federal level, state level. The larger the government, the smaller the economy. The larger the government sector, the smaller the private sector. And what these Harvard professors discovered is you pour a lot of federal money into a state, and that state's economy, the private investment in jobs and businesses actually shrinks by an average of 15%. So it's wrong to think of all this federal largesse as automatically being good for a state. It's not. It actually shrinks the economy of that state when what we want is exactly the opposite. We want a growing economy. The study says these changes in firm behavior persist throughout the chairmanship and begin to reverse after the congressman releases the chairmanship. We also find some evidence that firms scale back their employment and experience a decline in sales growth. So the more federal dollars that flow into a state, the economy shrinks, firms scale back employment, they don't pay as much, they don't hire as many people, and they experience a decline in sales growth. So it's not good for the private economy. However, it's good for lobbyists. Haley Barbour and Cochran scored a big victory in 2008 when they brought $580 million in federal money for low-income housing and then diverted it to an economic development project in the port of Gulfport, promising 5,000 jobs. 5 years later, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development studied the project and found that the port project has failed to deliver. They're still spending money. Money is going out every month, and nothing is being done. It was told to us that they created something around 1,000 jobs for port workers, but Cobb found it was only roughly 50 jobs, but the money continues to flow right out the door. K Street lobbyists like Trent Lott, Haley Barbour, they have benefited to the point where they are able to send $100,000 in donations to Cochran, not just Barbour and Lott, but D.C. lobbyists in general. $100,000 they have donated to Cochran, with over half of that money coming from lobbyists who work on federal spending bills. So realize what this is really all about. This is really all about putting money in the pockets of lobbyists. So the lobbyist says to the senator, look, if you will get this pork project for my state, I'm going to give you a whole wad of cash for your next campaign. So it's really not about the state that the guy happens to be from. I'm not talking specifically about Senator Cochran now. It's not really about the state that the guy happens to be from. It's about his own political career, how he generates campaign contributions and donations to his campaign coffers. It comes from lobbyists who say, look, you need to direct some money to my home state and to the business that I'm lobbying for. I'm lobbying for this industry. I'm lobbying for this business. If you'll get some taxpayer dollars into my industry, into my company, we are gonna bury you in cash, and that's how the project works. Meanwhile, nothing gets done, and the economy shrinks. Let's take a call, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Mike. Mike, welcome. What's on your mind?
Oh, thanks, Brian. It was refreshing to hear those two young men.
Wasn't that something?
Yeah, and also the fact that, what you're basically saying, it boils down to with the federal funds comes the bureaucracy. But I'd like to be a steward to those two young men and also make a statement about that. But for
go right ahead.
For those two young men, and I'd like to see the media get away from using the word accountable, because for the simple reason that was amended to the Constitution back in the late 1870s. And they got away from the precedence of law in the Constitution, where the word in Article 1, Section 3, Paragraph 7, Word 38 is liable. They are liable, not accountable. Now, as far as Thad goes, when he did his first on-air interview, a man with a six-figure salary and everything that comes from being up there almost as long as I have voted, not quite, but almost, stated, Tea Party? Who's the Tea Party?
Well, and Mike, he said that not just one, but actually said that 3 times, that he was unfamiliar with the Tea Party. He'd kind of heard about it, heard a little bit about it, but he really didn't know anything about it. And the first time I heard Senator Cochran say that, my first reaction is this is a guy that's pretty out of touch with what's going on politically. And then I thought, well, surely somebody on his campaign staff will bring him up to speed. Certainly somebody on his campaign staff will educate him about the Tea Party explain to him the origin of the Tea Party, the history of the Tea Party, the energy behind the Tea Party, so he'll have some level of awareness the next time the issue comes up. But then 2 more times, Mike, when he was asked about the Tea Party, he really indicated he didn't know anything about it.
Well, I expect a man that's being paid that kind of money to be aware of his job.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people are wondering, how engaged is Senator Cochran in his own home state? A lot of people have never seen him. That complaint comes up a lot. His home address he lists is in Washington, D.C., so he doesn't even list a home address in the state of Mississippi, and obviously spends the bulk of his time in Washington, D.C. That's where he lives. That's where his home address is. That's where his paychecks go, and that's where, his mail goes and all that kind of thing. And so people are wondering just how connected is Senator Cochran to what's going on right here in Mississippi. All right, Mike, listen, thank you for the call. I appreciate that. Now, I want to shift gears. You're welcome to call if you want to talk about the Cochran-McDaniel race. We're glad to have you do that. I want to shift gears, and we're going to talk about the IRS. We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about Iraq in the last half hour. We're going to wedge some sound bites in there. So get ready to drink from the fire hose, because we are going to hit ground running when we come back out of this break. Got some good news. First of all, I like to bring you, every once in a while, it's just a lot of bad news out there. When we get good news, we want to bring it your way to kind of lift your spirits. Well, here is a great piece of good news from Morgantown, West Virginia, from the Associated Press. A campaign to erect a statue in Morgantown honoring the late Don Knotts has topped its fundraising goal. Beth Fuller tells the Dominion Post that the Greater Morgantown Convention and Visitors Bureau recently donated $5,000 to the project. The gift boosted the state fund to more than $53,000. The goal was $50,000. So you will have the prospect of being able to visit Morgantown, West Virginia in the not-too-distant future and see a life-size statue of Don Knotts. Now, on a piece of really good news, and this is a winnable war moment for the day, Miriam Ibrahim has been released from prison in Sudan. She's the Christian woman that was shackled to a cell, had to give birth to her baby in a cell in a Muslim prison in Sudan. A judge ordered her released today from custody, and she has been released. She's got a baby in that, or had a baby in that cell, 20-month-old boy. Now she has been set free. Praise God for that. Back in 2.